1943, Bovington Training Grounds, Dorset. A crew of British tankers climbs aboard a 28-ton cruiser tank, fires the engine, and waits. The engine coughs. It shudders. It stalls. They try again. The 12-cylinder petrol engine finally catches, belching black smoke from an exhaust that runs far too hot. The tank lurches forward at barely 24 miles per hour, already slower than the Cromwell parked beside it, a tank built on the exact same hull. The difference is the engine. The Cromwell runs a Rolls-Royce Meteor producing 600 horsepower. The Centaur runs a Nuffield Liberty producing 395. The Liberty was designed in 1917 for an aeroplane in the First World War, and somewhere in Normandy a version of this tank will go to war carrying a wooden gun barrel instead of a real one. This is the Centaur, the tank that fooled nobody, fought anyway, and mattered more than anyone expected. To understand why Britain built a World War II tank around a World War I engine, you have to understand the crisis it was meant to solve. By late 1940, British cruiser tanks were failing. The Crusader, backbone of the Desert War, was mechanically fragile, thinly armoured, and armed with a 2-pounder gun that could not kill German medium tanks at combat ranges. The new Panzer IV carried 80mm of frontal armour and a long-barreled 75mm gun capable of destroying anything Britain fielded. British tank losses in North Africa were catastrophic. The General Staff issued an urgent requirement for a replacement cruiser tank armed with the new 6-pounder gun, protected by 76mm of frontal armour, and in service by 1942. 3 firms submitted designs in January 1941. Nuffield offered the A-24 Cavalier, essentially a stretched Crusader with the same Liberty engine the company had been building for years. Leyland Motors offered the A-27, a cleaner design with a new Merritt Brown gearbox. Birmingham Railway Carriage and Wagon Company proposed fitting the same A-27 hull with a radically different engine, the Rolls-Royce Meteor. The Meteor's origin story is worth telling. According to Rolls-Royce Company records, W.A. Robotham, head of the chassis division at Clan Foundry in Belper, had been collecting crashed Merlin aero engines, ones too damaged for aircraft but still rebuildable. His team stripped one of its supercharger, reversed its rotation for ground use, and installed it in a Crusader test hull. Delivered to Aldershot on April 6, 1941, the prototype was so fast that testers reportedly could not time it accurately, estimating roughly 50 miles per hour. The Meteor shared the Liberty's 27-litre displacement exactly. It produced 600 horsepower against the Liberty's 395. Same engine volume, nearly double the power, a quarter-century of engineering progress in a single comparison. Leyland agreed to produce 1,000 Meteors. Then Leyland reversed course, citing cooling concerns, and chose to stick with the familiar Liberty. The Ministry of Supply, rather than forcing the issue, split the program 3 ways. The Cavalier would use the Liberty and the old transmission. The Centaur, designated a 27L, would use the Liberty but with the new Merritt Brown gearbox. The Cromwell, designated a 27M, would use the Meteor. The A-27 hull was deliberately designed to accept either engine, enabling future conversion. The Meteor supply bottleneck was genuine. Every Rolls-Royce production line was building Merlins for Spitfires, Hurricanes, Lancasters, and Mosquitoes. Early Meteors came only from salvaged crash parts. The breakthrough arrived through a remarkable industrial swap. According to Rolls-Royce historical accounts, Ernest Hives of Rolls-Royce and Spencer Wilkes of Rover met at the Swan and Royal pub in Clitheroe in late 1942. Rover had been struggling with Frank Whittle's jet engine program. The 2 men agreed over dinner to trade responsibilities. Rover would take Meteor production. Rolls-Royce would take the jet. The handover took effect on January 1st, 1943, but Rover needed American machine tools that took months to arrive. Sufficient Meteor engines did not flow until mid-1943. The Centaur existed to keep tank factories running during the gap. It was a placeholder from the day it was born. How bad was it in practice? During Exercise Dracula in August 1943, a 2,300-mile endurance trial pitting the Centaur against the Cromwell and the Sherman, the Centaur finished last. According to the official trial report, it arrived at night bases hours after the other tanks. A November 1943 retest confirmed the pattern. The Liberty ran dangerously hot in the Centaur's confined engine bay. Reliability collapsed under the 28-ton load. The Cromwell delivered 21.4 horsepower per ton. The Centaur managed 14.1. The Sherman sat at 15.2. Even the German Panzer IV at 12 horsepower per ton had a more reliable drivetrain. Roughly 950 Centaurs were completed with Liberty engines. None were cleared for frontline combat as gun tanks. Now, before we get to the part where this tank actually fights, if you are enjoying this deep dive into British engineering compromises, hit subscribe. It takes a second, costs nothing, and helps the channel grow. Right, back to the Centaur. So what do you do with 950 tanks that cannot fight? You find other uses. The Centaur spawned 9 variants. The Mark I, armed with a 6-pounder, became a training tank for crews destined for Cromwells, since the controls were identical. The Mark III was re-gunned with a 75mm weapon. Then most were re-engined with Meteors and redesignated Cromwell IVs. The Centaur AA mounted twin 20mm Polston guns for anti-aircraft defence. The Centaur dozer had its turret removed and a bulldozer blade fitted, converted by the MG Car Company at Abingdon. Between 200 and 250 were produced, serving with the 87th Assault Dozer Squadron of the 79th Armoured Division, one of Hobart's funnies. Then there was the Centaur OP, the observation post variant. This tank carried a wooden dummy gun barrel in place of the real weapon, freeing turret space for extra radio sets and map tables. It served as an artillery spotter and formation command vehicle, alongside real Cromwells from Normandy to Germany. The wooden barrel was a tactical choice, making the vehicle visually identical to armed tanks, so the enemy would not single it out as a high-value target. The Imperial War Museum holds one today, marked as 7th Armoured Brigade, Northwest Europe, 1944. It fooled nobody into thinking the Centaur was a great tank, but the wooden gun fooled German gunners into thinking it was not worth special attention. That was enough. The one variant that saw real combat was the Mark IV, armed with a 95mm howitzer carrying 51 high explosive rounds. 114 were produced and assigned to the Royal Marines Armoured Support Group, formed on March 14, 1944 under Brigadier D.C.W. Sanders. The unit fielded 80 Centaur IVs and 20 Sherman Vs organised into 5 batteries. Each troop had 4 Centaurs and 1 Sherman for the troop commander. Remove the Centaur engines entirely, and mount the turrets as static guns on raised platforms inside landing craft tank vessels. This suited the Royal Marines' naval gunnery heritage, but the raised platforms made the landing craft dangerously top-heavy. According to unit records, several capsized during training exercises off England's south coast. Then, legend has it, Field Marshal Montgomery observed a demonstration and demanded to know why the tanks were not driving off the beached craft to support the infantry. In February 1944, just 4 months before the invasion, engines were reinstalled, drivers trained, and wading equipment fitted. On June 6, 1944, the Royal Marines Armoured Support Group hit 3 beaches. The 1st Regiment supported the 50th Division on Gold Beach. The 2nd supported the 3rd Canadian Division on Juno Beach. The 5th Independent Battery supported the 3rd British Division on Sword Beach. 48 Centaurs landed within 4 hours of H-hour. 20 were ashore within the first 15 minutes. The turrets carried distinctive compass graduation markings, 180 degrees at front and 360 degrees at rear, enabling the gun position officer on the landing craft bridge to call bearings and coordinate fire, essentially naval broadside techniques applied to tank howitzers. This made the Centaurs the only tanks on D-Day capable of firing a coordinated barrage on a single target. The after-action report recorded 10 guns engaging shore targets during the run in approach. Once ashore, 14 fired indirectly and 8 engaged targets with direct fire. Many were disabled by mines, enemy fire, or drowning in the surf. On Gold Beach, a Sherman was destroyed by 88mm fire, its entire crew killed. The regiment's headquarters craft was sunk. According to surviving accounts, the wounded 2nd in command eventually obtained a German staff car to continue operations. Despite orders limiting them to 1 mile from the waterline, the Centaurs fought for 15 days and pushed up to 10 miles inland. On Sword Beach, the 5th Battery supported commandos and participated in the capture of Douvres radio station. Brigadier Sanders was killed during the Normandy campaign. The most dangerous enemy proved to be the transport itself. The top-heavy, low freeboard landing craft caused more casualties to the Royal Marines Armoured Support Group than enemy action. Landing craft tank 2428, carrying 2 Centaurs to Juno Beach, capsized in the English Channel on the night of June 5th. Its tanks now rest on the seabed in Bracklesham Bay, West Sussex, at 20 metres depth, discovered by divers in 2008. After June 20th, the unit was disbanded. Surviving Centaur IVs went to Free French Forces and later to the 1st Canadian Centaur Battery, supporting the 6th Airborne Division. The Centaur dozers outlasted every other variant, serving through Korea and the Suez Crisis of 1956. 12 years after the war ended. Total of 27 production reached roughly 4,016 tanks. About 950 retained their Liberty engines as Centaurs. 3,066 received Meteors and became Cromwells. Around 200 Centaur IVs were re-engined and redesignated. The tank the Army wrote off as a training aid produced more specialised variants than any other British cruiser of the war. Today, one Centaur IV stands at the Pegasus Bridge Memorial in Normandy. Its name is Vedette. It landed on Sword Beach between Hermanville and Lyon-sur-Mer on June 6, 1944. Hit by mortar fire 500 yards from the waterline, its engine compartment ablaze. The crew abandoned it on the sand. It sat there for 31 years. In 1975, 7th Field Workshop of the Royal Electrical and Mechanical Engineers recovered it, restored it, and placed it where it stands now, one of the most visited tank memorials in France. The Centaur was a compromise, a tank built because one company preferred an engine it knew over one that was better, and because a ministry chose industrial harmony over decisive action. Its World War I engine produced barely 2/3 the power of the Meteor from identical displacement. It was too slow, too unreliable, too outdated for the war it was built to fight, but in the specific, violent, narrow front conditions of D-Day, 80 of them, crewed by Royal Marines applying centuries of naval gunnery discipline to tank howitzers, delivered fire that kept German defenders pinned while infantry crossed the most dangerous beaches in history. The tank with the wooden gun served undetected from Normandy to Germany. The tank with the bulldozer blade outlasted them all. British engineering did not create the Centaur on purpose. British pragmatism found a way to make it count.